Hello everybody and welcome to the Showcast, a series of candid conversations from film festivals and film markets everywhere, brought to you by The Film Verdict and hosted by yours truly, Matt Micucci. In this episode, we continue our podcast coverage of the 2023 San Sebastián International Film Festival in Spain with a close-up encounter with the talented Brazilian filmmaker Guto Parente, whose latest film, A Strange Path, was presented in the festival's Horizontes Latinos section. The film tells the story of a film director who returns to Brazil to screen a movie at his hometown's festival, only for the COVID pandemic to derail his plans. With nowhere else to turn, he decides to reconnect with his bizarre and estranged father, a choice that leads to a series of unusual happenings. In this conversation, Parente reveals the influence of his experimental filmmaking background and the autobiographical elements that inspired the story of A Strange Path. We also get into a conversation about his idiosyncratic fusion of experimental techniques and genre conventions, as well as the origins of his own cinephilia, and much more. So fire up an Audio Teeny and listen to the audio waves as they fly through the air. This is the Showcast. Hello, Guto.
Hello.
Welcome to the Showcast here in San Sebastián. Presenting a film that's called A Strange Path is the English title. It's a great film. Just as an icebreaker, though, I want to ask you, what was the starting point for you making this film? And I understand that it's a little autobiographical or based on personal experiences.
Yes, it's a very personal movie. Everything started when my father died in 2017. And I've always wanted to make a movie for him because I learned how to love movies because of him. He was a cinephile, and then we watched many movies together. So after he died, I felt that I had to do something for him and for our relationship. So when the pandemic started, like in April 2020, when we had the first lockdown, I was alone in my apartment and we didn't know anything about the future. I didn't know if I would be able to make a movie in the next months or years. I had no idea. Also, in Brazil, we had a pretty fucked up government. I don't know if I can cuss here. Better not.
It's encouraged. Yeah,
okay.
You're totally allowed.
All right. So we had this fascist government that was pretty much against culture and the artists. So they cut all the funds and everything. So it was it seemed like a nightmare. And I started writing the script as a way to keep my mind sane. And I started to feel some kind of reconnection with him. That's how it began. It's a movie about father and son relationship, a relationship that it's kept in distance because it's a very eccentric father. So I think it was a way to reconnect with my own history. So I had to talk about myself in the movie as well.
It's a simple question, but is there any challenge in trying to talk about yourself, or at least telling a story that is very personal?
Yes, this is my first movie that I really open up like this. Like I go, of course, every movie I've made before, they were personal movies in some way. But for this movie, I exposed a lot about myself, our relationship. The father's character has my father's name. And there's a book in the movie which was written by my father. So I had to find a lot of courage while I was writing to expose that much. But I believe that when we work on something which is personal, but we put our guts into it and we are honest, we are always able to connect with people. I think it's a universal story. I've been hearing people talking about their own relationships with their fathers or mothers after the screenings. So I think the movie is working pretty well, healing relations for me and for other people as well.
Yeah, and I also think that maybe the pandemic was a good time, right, for reconnecting with people.
Yeah, I think we got very close to death. I mean, everyone I know has someone who lost someone, knows someone who lost someone. So we were living in a time where we were feeling this sensation that we were like very close to the mystery of death.
So yeah, and you take that in a way because your film isn't, within it, this happens, the pandemic happens, and then also the style of the film kind of changes, takes some surreal turns and twists. So tell me a little bit about that. What do you think, as a filmmaker, intrigues you about the surrealist route? Is it the symbolism? Is it the metaphor that it allows you?
I like very much to play with genre codes in cinema, and I think I like the idea that that cinema can be a portal, transcendental portal to other dimensions. I can remember many films that I've watched that I kept inside me thinking about it, and I love mystery in film. So,
for example, what films would have shown you that this is possible in cinema?
There's all Luis Buñuel's movie, which is a Spanish master, and David Lynch is a filmmaker, which I love. There are many, many references. And I think that I like to work with the idea that everything is real and everything is fantasy at the same time. A dream that we have is something real that happens with us. And I think sometimes our society is kind of used to think reality in only one level. And I like to think reality in many possible levels and to think that we can live crossed over dimensions. So cinema for me is a great opportunity to do that, to feel that, and to make people feel that.
This is another thing that I liked about your movie is at some point, the protagonist of the film, somebody steals his phone. He kind of loses touch with the world. Isn't that crazy how we are so reliant on this technology?
Yeah, nowadays you pretty much can't do anything if you don't have a cell phone. You don't have a bank, you cannot have a bank account, you cannot make a transfer, you cannot get a cab, you cannot, it's just everything is related to the cell phone, which, I'm not complaining because I use it and it's very important for many, many aspects, but I think that, for the narrative, it seemed to me that was pretty important, like to make the character be more and more isolated, because the movie is like a fever dream and everything is going wrong with the character and he's dealing with this situation that he doesn't understand, nobody understands. And then losing his phone was like, okay, so I'm in the middle of the pandemic, I have nowhere to go, I have no one to call, what can I do?
Do you consider yourself a particularly visual filmmaker? Like when you set off on a project, do you have an idea of the way, of the look of the film, of the feel of the film, more than the written word?
Yes, I think I do, because all my career, I've come from experimental cinema. So all my first movies, they were first thought through images and then through the storytelling. And from 10 years, since 10 years, I've been developing more and more my writing skills. And I think that now I can merge the visual aspects with the narrative aspects with some much more consciousness. I think like the choices that I make, the storytelling and the visual, they are more connected. But for me, there are many scenes that the image come first than the story.
What do you like about the writing process, or do you find it difficult? Because for some people, the thought of like sitting down at a desk and kind of punching words away, it's very difficult. Do you find it challenging? Some aspects of the writing process challenging?
Well, I love writing very much, and when I'm writing, I feel as if I was making the movie. So by that time, during the pandemic, which I didn't know when I was going to be able to shoot, for me, the time when I was writing, I was seeing the movie, I was watching the movie, and rewriting for me is like re-editing. I also work as editor. I usually edit many films from other directors. Also, I edit my own films. And I think writing and editing are pretty much the same thing. One thing that you do before and one thing you do after. But if you are writing, thinking as an editor, and you edit thinking as a writer, you can put your film into other level. I just love writing. For me, it's never painful.
Never painful. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is your film revolves around a father and son relationship. At some point, though, and you brought up the book, it was really interesting because, passages from the book are read out, and it seems to talk a lot about masculinity, or at least that's how I perceived it. And I wondered whether that too was something that you wanted to explore with this film. For those that haven't seen the film, it's sort of like a guide on how to be a man. Would that be right? I mean, how would you explain it?
Yeah, this book, it's pretty funny for me because when I found out about it, when my father wrote it and he published, and I didn't know about it. And
you didn't know about it?
No, because he was actually very mysterious. So he was mysterious at the point where he published the book, and my mother didn't know and I didn't know. So we found out like many years later that he published the book.
Damn.
And when I read the book, it's how do you say?
Self-help, yeah.
Yeah, self-help book. It's pretty much giving tips for you to have a better life and improve your life, and to have better relationship with your family and friends and with your wife or husband. As I was reading, I couldn't see actually my father. So it was like, okay, so you say you do, you
don't
say
practice what you preach.
That's it. So
yeah.
That's something funny about the book. He was a completely different person from the person that he proposes you to be. It's a very generic kind of advices, and for me, it's much more like funny stuff. Like,
have expectations changed from what your father outlined in the modern world, or do they still hold true, do you think?
Well, I don't know how the book would be accepted today in the modern world, but I think he was careful about the man and women role in the relationship. I think it's written by a man in the 90s. So
do you find some parallels between your father, writing this book and not telling anybody, and you as a filmmaker? Not so much for this film, obviously, but your experimental work before it. Experimental cinema is like challenging, and it's almost got its own little circuit, Do you feel there are some similarities?
Actually, not as much, because I think that when he wrote the book, he was trying to hit the jackpot. And when you do an experimental movie, you know that you won't hit any jackpot, because as you said, it's something that is very restricted. As
works for some people, right? Jordan Peterson, I'm not a big fan, but
yeah.
He's made a whole living on it.
Yeah, I love experimental movies. Yeah. I love experimental film. And I think the idea of it, because we talk about experimental as almost as a genre itself. But I think Alfred Hitchcock as an experimental filmmaker.
He experimented all the time,
Yeah.
Like really, when I think of every one of his films, there's always something that he experimented with. I was just thinking recently about Rope. I don't know if you've seen it.
It's all in one shot.
And what he said about that film was, yeah, it was an experiment. It didn't work, but, I tried.
Oh, he didn't like the movie because the movie wasn't a success, because Hitchcock was much about that. So he thought himself as an entertainer, not an artist. But it's a wonderful movie.
So why make that transition? Or did you always think that you would transition from experimental cinema to this, which is still experimental to some extent, but, it talks to a more quote unquote mainstream or wider audience?
Yeah, there was a girl that talked to me after one of our screenings in Tribeca, that she said, well, I felt that was amazing how you brought experimental cinema to narrative cinema. So I think the movie kind of give the taste of some experiences we can have in cinema that most of the people or some people are not very used to. So I think for me, it's important to be open to all kind of experience, sensorial experience, not only narrative experiences. I think cinema is a powerful dream tool. Like as Buñuel would say, cinema is the dream language.
So did you always think about becoming a filmmaker even when you were younger?
Not really. I like to draw. I used to draw a lot, but I always felt that I would become an artist somehow. When I was a teenager, I played guitar. I wanted to be a guitar player. I had a band. It was a terrible band. We didn't.
What did you play? I'm a huge fan of Brazilian music.
You are?
I am. Yeah.
Well, actually, I didn't play much of Brazilian music. I played like Nirvana, Rage Against the Machine, and lots Metallica.
Still good.
But Brazilian music is amazing. Anyways, it didn't work out, and I always had this very passionate relationship with cinema. I've been always a cinephile, and then when I realized I was making some videos in the beginning of the 2000s, and I was making some videos, some experimental videos, and then I decided to study cinema and decided to be a filmmaker.
Would you say there's a vibrant experimental film scene in Brazil?
Yes, I think I come from a state in Brazil in the Northeast, which is one of the poorest regions in Brazil. So it took a long time for us to access film fundings and to access money to make films. So when the digital came and we could have our little cameras, like long time before cell phones would have cameras, I think we started to play with it, with images and sounds, and experiment. And then there was some kind of scene that happened back then. I was part of a collective of artists called Alumbramento, which was a group there were filmmakers, musicians, and writers, and we started to do things by ourselves because it was possible with digital. So it was a pretty natural path.
Well, Brazil does have a great history of experimental cinema, or at least blending it. The cinema novo tradition. I recently watched a film Terra em Trance.
Yes.
I thought it was that's an amazing film, isn't it? I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, of course.
Incredible.
It's Glauber Rocha's movie. It's a classic. It's
what a great man.
Yeah, yeah. No, we do have like in the 60s, there was a group called Cinema Marginal that was like a Cinema Novo, actually was kind of mainstream. And there was this group, Rogério Sganzella, Júlio Bressani, Oswaldo Candeias, some filmmakers who would make movies with almost nothing, like 16 millimeters, and there are a bunch of great movies. I can recommend you some.
After this interview, I have to ask you a question because I've been looking for one particular Brazilian film that I have no idea what it is, but you might know. You might be able to help me out. I just want to ask you in closing, now that, this film, Strange Path, is out, I just would like to know, do you have any ideas of what direction you'd like to take your cinema next? Having made this leap, which we talked about, transition between experimental cinema to something that still experiments, but also is accessible to a wider audience. Where do you see your cinema taking you next?
Actually, I have no idea, but I like not knowing it because I am about to shoot a movie next year, which is a comedy. And I don't like to program a lot about what I'm going to do, like as a career project. I like to think each movie as a completely new experience. And so I hope I can make movies that can can be seen by a wider audience, because I want my movies to be seen. I like to communicate with people, but I also like people to have new experiences. So I guess I will keep doing genre cinema with a lot of experimentations, and I don't know where I'm going.
I don't know where I'm going. Well, that's a good place to start, maybe. But in the meantime, I thank you very much for joining us. It's been great chatting with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. It was very fun.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Guto Parente, the latest episode of our on-location Showcast coverage of the 2023 San Sebastián International Film Festival in Spain. More exclusive Showcast conversations from this prestigious annual event will soon be following, so make sure to stay tuned for those ones. And while you're at it, check out some of our previous episodes as well from San Sebastián and other festivals that we have covered throughout 2023. Till the next time, from The Film Verdict, this is Matt Micucci signing off. See you soon.